Welcome. This course is about you as a trainer. I'll share with you some information that I hope will be helpful to strengthen your skills and strengthen your confidence. We'll cover the workshop in 3 parts. First, we'll look at the structure of a workshop and how to get off to a good start. We'll follow that with part 2, how to make learning stick. And then go into part 3, which is all about you and what you personally bring to the workshop. We have prepared a handout packet. Please download that and follow along with the workshop. There will be some opportunities for you to stop and reflect on what we're doing and make some notes and plans for how you incorporate it into your work. So, who am I? Let me tell you a little about myself. My name is Cathay Reta. I'm a literacy initiatives consultant to the California Library Literacy Services programs. I've been involved in training with those programs, CLLS programs, for about 40 years. I started as a volunteer tutor in 1984. Our program said they needed some help in doing the training, and I thought it looked like fun. I had enjoyed my training workshop, so I volunteered. A year later, I was the paid staff, the program coordinator for that library. And after that, I went on to work at 3 different public libraries, coordinating their CLLS programs and helping others do training. And I was director of training for California Literacy for 5 years. California Literacy was a nonprofit organization back in those many years ago. And I had, through all these experiences, opportunity to learn a lot from some great mentors, to participate in some great training sessions. And I just kept building and learning. And I find that here I am now, 40 years later, I still enjoy it, and I'm still learning. So to help us set a focus and bring our attention to this workshop, I'm going to ask you to think about a recent workshop you've been in, maybe as a participant, or maybe even leading the workshop. Bring to mind a word or a phrase that might describe that experience. Maybe it's something positive like inspiring or informational, or maybe not so positive. Was it boring or confusing? Just bring that to your mind for a moment. I'll ask you to reflect on that experience throughout the workshop in a couple of places. For right now, let me tell you that if we were in an interactive virtual online course, I would ask you to write that word or that phrase in chat so we could share with one another. If we were face-to-face in a live training, I would ask you to turn to your neighbor and to share that word, to tell about that experience. Why is that important? It helps to start a workshop with engagement. First, of course, it helps to shift our focus to the topic that we're covering. Secondly, it's helpful to engage in this way because we know that if someone talks at the beginning of a workshop, they're more likely to stay engaged and continue to talk and share throughout the workshop. So, and I mentioned if we were live, I would ask you to share in pairs. And again, that's because it's hard for some people to speak up in front of a group, and especially at the very beginning. So it's much safer to speak in pairs or even in groups of 3. And then sometimes you can go around and ask for volunteers from the groups to share. That's a safer way to get started, and it's still engaging everyone. But you have to be mindful of the time you're taking to do that. In a short workshop, it shouldn't be very long. I attended a conference workshop once. It was a 1-hour session, and I sat down, got settled in. The presenters asked each of us to introduce ourselves, what library we're from, and why we're there. There were about 30 of us in the room for a 1-hour workshop. I knew that wasn't going to work, and it didn't. 25 minutes in, we're still going around and having people share. Yeah, I was pretty upset. That's not good use of time, so you have to consider how much time you have and what your focus is. If it had been a full day workshop, and especially if one of the purpose was to get us to build a community, we're a group that would be working together in our libraries, then it's really helpful to take that much time in that sort of introduction, but not when you're just kind of presenting information to a group that won't be together again. So you start with engagement. Look for ways to get people talking. So you've heard of that, of course, as an icebreaker, right? And what we know is some people like icebreakers and some do not. And that all has to do with if they are relationship-oriented or task-oriented. A relationship-oriented person comes into a training session and they're looking around to see who is there, and they stop and chat, introduce themselves, because they're there about people. That's what kind of motivates them. The task-oriented person will come in and look to see if there's any evidence of learning that'll take place. They like seeing the handouts or a notebook on the table, something like that. There may be an assignment, something to start thinking about, written on a flip chart, something to do. That helps them to settle into a comfort level. One's not better than another. They're just different preferences that people have. So it's helpful to get people started to settle in by meeting what helps them settle in, whether it's an opportunity to walk around and talk with others, or a chance to see that they can get right into some meaty work. So moving on, let's get right into it and talk about time. Time. How do we respect time? Do we understand it? How well do we use it? So there's the ongoing debate, and I still struggle with it, but do you start on time? My bias is yes, you start on time. You acknowledge and reward the people that are there on time. It just makes sense. And I found if you're consistently starting your trainings or your meetings 5 minutes, 10 minutes late, well, the audience will say, oh, I've got 5 minutes. They don't start on time anyway. And you're training them to come in late, that it's okay. So I'd say start on time. But here's a key. Don't start with critical information. Start with something that's good enough, a meaty enough discussion, or something that will cause those who come in a little bit later to realize, oh, they started, I've missed something. But don't make it something that you're going to have to go back and repeat later on. So it's a little tricky. And honestly, I understand it. If I'm expecting 15 people, it's time to start and only 2 are there, I will kind of hem and haw and visit with them a little bit rather than start right in. It is an issue, but think about it and be ready with what are you going to do? How are you going to handle that? One thing that helps too is to have your workshop outlined so you know how much time everything takes. Use that to help you, because what if you're running late? If you start late, then you're going to have to cut out something somewhere. And I can tell you from experience, just speaking faster doesn't work. When I was very new as a trainer, maybe my 3rd workshop I was doing with a supervising trainer who was teaching me. And we got to the site that morning and there had been raining and the floor was flooded and the staff of that park room would not let us in to start until they could clean up the flood. Understandable. That means we were a good 30 or 40 minutes late in starting our workshop. And so I felt like I knew how much we needed to share and we needed to make up some time. So at one section, I was just making up time by talking faster, and I was going through the material and turned to this page and that. And one man finally raised his hand and said, "This isn't helpful at all. I can't follow you. You're talking too fast." And he was right. I was embarrassed, but wow, what a great lesson I learned. So what I learned was have some room in my outline or know it well enough that I have a backup plan. If something happens and we're a half hour off, maybe it's something bad, like we couldn't start on time, or maybe it's just there was such a rich and needful discussion on an earlier part of the topics that we let it go longer than anticipated. But I know I have to make up time somewhere. So I always have in the back of my mind, what can I sacrifice? What can I cut if we run out of time? And that also helps me to make sure I'm not going to miss something because we got to the end of it and suddenly there wasn't enough time. So keep that in mind. You've got to kind of watch the clock, make sure that you get your priorities covered, and just honoring time and people's time and those who came. So last thing I'd like to share about opening your workshop is you need to establish your credibility, to tell something about yourself. Yes, that can be very uncomfortable, but it is needful. Someone recently told me that her friend had shared she went to a workshop and she just went through it. And after it was over, she learned what the background of that presenter. And she was surprised. It was pretty impressive background. She told her friend, had I known that, I probably would have paid more attention. So do give your credentials if you have them. Let them know about yourself. And if you don't have any impressive credentials, you still have your life experience. Why are you there teaching this subject? Why are you presenting this information? What is your enthusiasm, your experience with it? Share that. But you do need to establish that sort of credibility. So we're going to go on into looking at the structure and engagement activities as you're designing the workshop. In your packet, you have this handout, which you'll probably be able to see a little more, well, maybe be able to see it more easily. And this helps for you to have some structure and planning. And it shows you some decisions to make, like consider in your workshop, how much time do I have? How much of the learner's knowledge will I use? How important is it that they really retain all the information? Do I need to watch and see that they understand what I'm presenting? And you can kind of start developing your training. You'll see that there's trade-offs along the way. So and you'll see those towards the top, they certainly require more time in the presentation. Those near the bottom, not so much. Well, let's walk through each one individually and give it some thought here. Reading. Of course, that's a good tangible assignment, especially you may ask people to read something before they come. And it's a wonderful start to a workshop if everyone comes in having the same background, having read the same material. It gets them off to a good start. But you don't know if they read it, and you don't know what they took away from it unless you have a discussion about it. So it does have a place, but it may not be the most effective. And honestly, you know what happens? People get there and they haven't done the reading. And so you need to make some place in your workshop where they're brought up to the same understanding as those who have read it. But that's one possibility. The next one up from that is a lecture, just to give a straight lecture. And as you know, and I'm no doubt you've heard the statistics about how much you remember from something that you hear. So it's not maybe the most effective. You can make it more effective with some skilled storytelling, with the presentation, what you're doing to keep the interest of the people, but you have to be really careful with lecture. And honestly, I find I end up lecturing most often when I just don't have time to present in a way that I really want to present it. Then the question is, then should you cut down some of the content? Should you cover less, but cover it deeper? So as you might see here, what I'm giving you is a lot of questions to consider as you're designing your workshop. And let's be honest, this platform right now, what I'm doing is lecture. We don't have the mechanism in this particular training for you to be sharing and for us to go back and forth. So I really have to rely on the design of the training to hopefully keep your interest and get everything going across here. So next one moving up our list is demonstration. That's even better when people can look at a video or some type of demonstration about what they're learning. And what's even better than that is if it's followed with discussion, or even if you just have discussion, maybe about something they read or the information that you're presenting in lecture. If you can have discussion, involve people in it, then that's really helpful. We know, again, people don't necessarily remember what you say, but they'll pretty much remember what they say. So when they have a chance to come through and repeat it, that's really helpful. It's probably worth your time to take some good trainings on facilitating group discussions. There are some techniques and tips to it that are really helpful. Also, when you're having a discussion, it's a chance to clarify misinformation or something you may have left out of the information you're sharing, that as you're talking with the participants, that'll become clear. Of course, I have to add, there's an extra level of challenge when you're working in a virtual workshop and trying to do discussion. You can still get it going, but it takes a lot more bringing the people out, maybe a combination of unmuting and sharing and writing in chat and doing breakouts, but you can get some discussion going even there. Just a word about role play. That's also very helpful, especially depends on the type of information you're sharing or the skills that you want people to learn. And role play, no, it's not a real situation. It's kind of awkward at times, but it really does help to bring to the surface what it feels like or what questions might come up when someone's applying a certain strategy. For instance, in training tutors, I teach the language experience approach, in which and put people in pairs. One's the tutor, one role plays the learner. The learner tells a story to the tutor, and the tutor writes it down. And then I walk around and watch how it's happening and what's going on as they're doing that exercise. And it's really helpful, and you can find some things and just bring up from the experience, like you might have to talk about how they need to print instead of do cursive writing, and how you use the learner's exact words. And the learners get to, the tutors get to experience the feel of what it's like to try to keep up with the learner as they speak, or how to politely slow the learner down so I can get it all in writing. But it gives you a lot to work with doing that sort of role play. But one key is role play does need feedback and discussion. You just send people to go role play and then move on. Okay, we finished that. What's up next? You're not really pulling the meat out of it and the learning. So remember to have time for some feedback and to discuss what the experience was like. Structured experience is a part I really like. And that's where you create a situation or an exercise and then pull the learning from it. It could be like doing a listening assessment, an inventory, and then talking about what the trainees learned about themselves, what the participants felt about it. Here's, I think, a great example I got to experience about experiential learning was when I attended a session at University Associates. It's called Group Facilitation Practice, 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 a 2-day workshop. They brought us in the first day. We met each other. There was a group. We were probably 50 of us. And then they put us in groups and had us start practicing facilitating the group. They gave us, a question or some assignment to work on, and someone would facilitate it. Then we stopped and we pulled it apart. We analyzed it. We debriefed what happened, how it went. And then we did it again with the next person facilitating. And we kept doing that all day. It was powerful. And into the second day, and we were drawing the learning out of what we were experiencing. I was so impressed with the workshop afterwards. Before I left, I went and talked to the instructor and I asked about it. And he said, they used to do that workshop by just, just giving a lot of information up front and then having people practice. And he said it just wasn't working. But once they switched to this model of just putting them in it, putting them in the experience, and then breaking that down and discussing it, it just really took off. And I could really see the difference in that. It made a big difference. So I think that's powerful. Let's talk about on-the-job training. Isn't that perfect? And I will say one of the best experiences I ever had training tutors is where I went to a program and they had matched their tutors with learners without any training. I do not recommend that. Please don't take that away as something you should do. But I will tell you, those tutors were so primed and ready for some training, and everything we covered, they could apply it because they mentally could see it. They knew that's what the learner needed. Oh, it just filled in the blanks of some of the frustrations they had had. So certainly when you're learning something where you're already in a situation and you can apply it, that's beautiful. So that's a good point for a good argument for doing follow-up trainings on the job. Once people are already in the position working on it, then they can really take and learn a lot more. So the key with all of this is really to be intentional as you're designing your training. Consider how much time you have, or consider the content you want to cover and think about how much time you need to plan into that training. Think about how much of your learner's knowledge you're going to use. Hopefully it's as much as you can, because they do bring experience and background and information with them. You got to think about the retention. And part of it's like, how long can you retain their attention as you're presenting that? And then how long will they retain it? And what do you need to be able to observe and how to do that? So another thing with that is to know your goals. So it's a lot of thinking that goes into setting up a workshop, a lot of planning on what you're going to do. And whether it's just giving out some information, maybe just a reading assignment would do it. But if you really need to teach skills and have people reflect and be able to use what they're learning, then it's going to need quite a bit more. And you're going to move further up that chart of those technologies we looked at. I want to get personal now. On page 3 in your handout packet, there are some questions. I'd like for you to reflect. Take a moment and number 1, recall that previous training I asked you to bring to mind at the beginning. So did anything we've talked about so far have any resonate with you in that? Did you see anything about why it made it a great training or why it made it a poor training? Just take a moment, write in your handout about that. And then secondly, think of a current training that you're working on or that you want to teach, and think about which of those technologies would support that training the best. So I'm going to ask you to do that. And that finishes this part 1. So after you've done that, come on back and we'll move on to part 2, how to make learning stick. Thank you.